Hey, everybody. My classic line for a podcast and everything else. I'm excited to be here. I'm Charli Matthews. I am the founder and president of Empowering Brands, which includes a media brand, Empowering Pumps and Equipment, and the Empowering Industry podcast. And I'm joined by my co-host, Bethany Womack, for the podcast. Bethany, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Bethany Womack. I'm in Houston, Texas. I'm the brand development manager at Empowering Brands, and I'm on the podcast. And I'm excited to be here to talk about podcasts with all of our podcast friends.
That's what we're going to do. So get ready. James and Rob, they're here as well. So I'm just going to let you go ahead and tell them a little bit about you. We know you, so I never know what kind of question to ask, but introduce yourselves. We'll let James go first, and then tell us maybe a little bit about why you started your podcast.
So hello, everybody. My name is James Soto. I am the founder and CEO of Industrial, and I am born industrial, raised digital, and I absolutely love working and celebrating and honoring people throughout the manufacturing sector. And it's just something I love to do. And I started recently the Industrial Strength Marketing podcast, and the focus of the podcast is to really help people throughout the supply chain make marketing the strength of their business. And so in this journey, I've come across podcasting and met amazing folks like Charli. And I know, is today a very special day, Charli?
That's right. We're celebrating Podcast Day.
It's Podcast Day. So glad to be here.
Excellent. Well, I am glad to have been on all of these podcasts. And I really think that marketing is key at being able to share stories and send that out. And so I loved being on your podcast, James, because we got to tie in our two worlds there and talk about how important that is. Then I'll give you, I guess I'll give it to you, Rob. I'll give you the floor. This is my coach, and he's taught me so much. But I would say you're an expert in podcasts. How many do you have now, Rob?
So I host two podcasts now, and then obviously I've created the third, which is now, we've been running Maintenance Disrupted now for, I think it's 3.5 years. And so I'm probably 200-ish episodes in the bank for me. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah. So I met, and probably we can kind of go into this about podcasts, but first, Rob, let's tell them who you are, kind of what you do. What are your podcasts before I jump the gun here?
Yeah. So I'm Rob Kalwarowsky. I'm the host of the Leadership Launchpad Project podcast and Dismantling the High Performance Narrative podcast. Right now, I am a high performance leadership coach. And so what we're doing is we're bringing high performance leadership mindset strategies to the workplace. So stuff like psychological safety, how to build trust, how to build the growth mindset, how to change and empower your people. These are the things that we're really trying to help people's companies with, because, and this is where the story comes in. I spent 10 plus years working as a reliability engineer and asset manager in mining, oil and gas, and heavy industry consulting. And I didn't see that when I went out to the field. And all I saw was the same mediocrity that we see out there. And once I learned that there was a better way, I had to bring it to everyone out here. So that's why I'm here.
So he's been doing that for a while. He's been sharing and people's stories, kind of going through this process and talking about reliability, and then leadership, and then storytelling and mindset. Like, this is what we're all about. So I would say that, just trying to think back to my own origin story, I was introduced to podcast and, really wanted to be part of podcasts before I had my own. But I will say Mel Butcher, who helped us create the Empowering Women's podcast, really helped us know that it was possible. We created that. We were able to share stories and have a plan, figure out all this equipment that was out there that you need. But then we shifted that a little bit to okay, if we were going to do a podcast, and you probably can relate to this, we wanted to actually add value to everyone else. Okay. Be better than just, okay, we're going to share what we already share on a podcast. And so I brainstormed around this, and then I said, hey, Bethany, what do you think? And really, I think that Bethany's passion for podcasting, her family is in podcasting. She kind of give me the idea that we could do it. So Bethany, you want to talk a little bit about your side of that and kind of what you saw for the Empowering Industry podcast for one?
Yeah. And I think Rob and James, y'all can both attest to this. A year ago, 2 years ago, it just felt like there was a void in the industry for podcasts as far as news goes and B2B marketing decisions and all those kind of things. And so we really felt like it was the next natural evolution of Empowering Pumps. We give people the news through the newsletter, and then now we're just going to deliver it to them via the podcast. But Charli's passion for telling people stories also really lends itself well to a podcast. So like Charli said, my husband does podcasting. And so I kind of knew how to do some things. And so I kind of wrote out a plan for her. I'm like, this would be great. Let's get Vince to co-host it with you. Let's get whoever to co-host it with you. And eventually, apparently they all said no. And here I am.
I was like, no, Bethany can do it. She's awesome. And
yeah,
she does a
but
great
it's been
job.
fun. Yeah, it's been fun. And one thing that I really like about it is the quality of community that you build through a podcast that I don't feel like you get through all other mediums, where even if your audience isn't super big, you have those dedicated listeners that are there and know you, and they kind of feel like you're their best friend because they listen to you all the time. And so, I listen to my best friend James talk about marketing and
that's right.
All that kind of stuff.
And I'm like, oh, I need a little pump me up. I think I'll go listen to one of Rob's podcasts right now. Get me back.
Yeah, I actually found myself listening. I was listening to this podcast. I was like, oh wait, I'm in it. So
that's awesome.
And it's the worst when you're listening to it and someone says a word wrong or asks a question that you know the answer to, and you're screaming into the void of your headphones and they can't hear you. But then you get to jump on Twitter and tell them what they did wrong or whatever. And so it's one of my favorite things about podcasts.
The podcast medium is so exciting right now. And, what's interesting is if you're listening to this episode, I guess, right? There's a bunch of folks who really care about industry and manufacturing and, the industrial sector. And, there's a community forming here. And, recently we did an episode on the Industrial Marketing Show called The Rise of Top Manufacturing Podcasts. And we went through all the business case for it and how it's, remember when people were first getting into search or on social media as that was forming in 2008 and Twitter was gaining traction. And we're really at that moment again. And it's just really exciting to get the call yesterday from Charli saying, hey, we're going to do an international podcasting day thing. Oh my gosh, this is a thing. Let's do it. So
that's right.
So I think we're at a good moment in time. And I couldn't think of a better place to be today than here having this podcast. So, wow. Okay. Fun times.
Let's say, I want to ask you, what's your favorite, you too, Rob, what's your favorite memory? Because we've been doing it 100. We're approaching 100 episodes. We're getting really close. And so I don't want to, right, compared to Rob, there's not that many. But James, what's one of your favorite memories? And then you, Rob.
Finally sending one out.
Yeah,
I'm podcasting. Oh my gosh. I've heard I'm a big fan of Think Media, and one of the things he says is you just gotta press send or press play or press record and press send. And what he also says, Sean Cannell, he basically says, don't judge, someone's beginning by someone else's middle. And I think when it comes to podcasting in the manufacturing sector, we're not going to be looking at the largest volumes of downloads. We're not going to be looking at, a lot of metrics that are not quite there yet. I just looked at the actual auditing data, and we're still working on that, right, to get real metrics. But this is really about speaking to your niche of a niche, your audience of an audience, and it's just a long game. And I think this is what's great about it. And I think the audience will grow with us, right?
Yeah, but you can think about, and Rob, I didn't forget about you. You think about sitting in a room with 100 people. How valuable is that? So just think of your top 100 friends. If they're on that podcast listening to you, it's just this is remarkable. And if they'll just respond back to us, what an amazing opportunity. So, okay, Rob, your turn.
Honestly, Charlie, that's what I always thought about it, right? Is like I would go to these conferences and I would do talks and it would cost like $2,000 to $3,000 and I would get 40, 50 people in the room. And like when I think for the maintenance show, we get like 300, 400 people an episode. Some of them have gone up to 600, 700. And you're like, you can literally keynote at the biggest conferences that we have and basically never get that. Like maybe you get 700, 800, right? And it's like you're paying lots of money to do this, right? Versus a podcast, like I can sit and I can have a conversation. Like I know you're in Tuscaloosa, right? And it's like it didn't cost us anything to fire this up. And I think like for people out there, and people always, and I know we're gonna go here, but people always ask me like, why do you want to start a podcast? And it's for me, it's literally the best networking tool in the world.
Yeah.
You can ask anyone to come on the show and most people say yes because they want to talk about the thing that they got going on,
Mhm.
the thing that they're an expert in. And I've had so many authors on, like all the shows I've done. Each person brings something special, and it's an opportunity to learn and to dig into what you're interested about. And I think that's the thing that, I don't feel like I limit my shows based on like a specific thing. It's almost like wherever I want to go, I just have people on.
Well, that's the best part. I mean,
That's why
Bethany,
you have your own podcast, so you can do whatever you want, right?
that's exactly right. And, I think that's the key is like you mentioned, okay, I want to tell people stories. I want them to tell their story. So it's exciting to be able to say, I met this cool person. Let me share them with the world. Like that to me, I could do that every day, all day long. And, I'd run out of energy eventually, but I would love every second of it. Bethany, what's some tips if somebody, what do you think? Somebody's wanting to start their podcast. I know what you told me, but go ahead.
Yeah. So my number one tip is like consistency is king. If you're going to create an audience, you have to be consistently there in the same day, the same time, every week to every 2 weeks, just so they know when they can count on you to come listen to you. And so there's tons of stuff to figure out, like get a mic that's cheap, use your iPod what are these things called? AirPods.
Yeah, I say it wrong every time.
To record or whatever. I think like audience will forgive technical things. Like James was saying, you can't judge someone's beginning on someone else's middle, but what they won't forgive is inconsistency and if they can't count on you. So number one thing, just kind of map out a plan and be prepared to just grind it out to where your podcast comes out at the same time, every whatever interval you decide.
James, you got any tips?
Wow. I think it's as long as you really have a point of view, that's really, really important. And there's so many reasons why you would podcast, right? There's real business reasons. There's passion reasons. There's just maybe a lack of self-awareness. So maybe you're just a solo caster and you're just doing your thing, in the wild out there. I think there's those folks out there. I think a lot of our shows are interview-based shows, right? And I think those are important because there aren't a lot of podcasts. They are many forming and manufacturing, as we know, but there's so many podcasts. I think we interviewed Lou Weiss and Tim Grady from Manufacturing Talk Radio podcast. And
love them.
They talked about how, when you look at 100 million podcasts or whatever the number is up to now, you have to take 40% of them off the top right away. They just did one podcast and that was it.
Wow.
And then you start taking it down another 15% for the ones that, just did like a couple and dropped it. And the ones that, like to your point, consistency is king, there's still very few. And I kind of think of this as something that harkens back to the days where people were like snatching their like social media account names and their domains. I really think that when you look at, an empowering industry or pumps or wherever you're focused on, that's the opportunity to grab the authority position. And I think to your point, Rob, working on, with a lot of authors, it's really key because you get to ride their authority. And if you all have met Drew McClellan with the Agency Management Institute. He wrote with the Onward Nation podcast leader, Stephen Westner, a book called Sell with Authority. And it's all about authority strategy and how you essentially, if you're going to do a podcast, the business reason is around establishing an authority position, being able to literally hack your key customers you actually want to do business with, have them on your show. And then they get to kind of know you a little bit, and then you do that fireside chat afterwards. Yeah, by the way, like, who's helping you with that? And it's probably one of the best hacks out there. And a lot of folks really want to be in your show, but I think to that, like that community, getting to know people and letting them like shine. I hope that like we get that access as long as we can. And
Yeah.
I think you guys have been doing a great job with it.
Well, I was just, as you're talking, I was thinking, that value that you mentioned, like the bringing your value, like your perception, you like what you think, your opinion, to the table is so important, because I think we're doing a little bit of that, maybe outside of our space a little bit. But when you have a podcast, you don't get to like not talk about what you really feel, like your authentic self, I guess is what I'm getting at. You can't hide that. You can't really script around yourself. You have to like, well, this is actually what I think about that, as you're going back and forth with somebody.
That's that point of view he was talking about. Like you have to have your own.
Yes. See, this is why Bethany has to be part of our podcast to keep me on track.
I want a Bethany over here. I need some help.
I need years of practice getting to interpret what you're meaning when you're talking.
She can just pick it straight out of my brain. But yeah, the point of view, right? Like I always wanted to kind of hide that a little bit, I think, in podcasts, or I didn't want to hide it, but I didn't really know of how I could just say, okay, this is what I think about this. For a purpose though. So each of us has a purpose for the podcast, and okay, you want to tell your story while interviewing someone that makes sense for the industry, for example. Like, are we going to create change? Well, you have to be able to be bold enough to say your point of view. That was the point I was trying to make.
You're all about that, Charlie.
Well, it takes some time.
That's why I had you on the show, because of what you're doing for women in manufacturing. You're looking at diversity, equity, inclusion, and that's just contagious. And that's what people need to see out there about what's happening in the sector, in industrial and manufacturing. And
yeah, well, I learned that from Rob going through his Leadership Launchpad program, like what's my why? And then, overcoming some of those mindset challenges with Bethany's help of reading a script. And you can go off script from time to time, but having that.
Which, as a firsthand recipient of the benefits of Charlie going through the Leadership Launchpad, let me say thank you, Rob, and other people sign up for it. People that you work with will thank you. So
I love it. I love it. So a part of the thing that we wanted to do was highlight you guys. I want to say thank you for, having me on your podcast, having my friends on your podcast. And then, I haven't had James on my podcast yet. So I know we mentioned it. So hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Welcome, to ours is next, right?
actually, that's what my whole season 4 is going to be about. It's going to be all with other fellow manufacturing influencers and podcasters. I thought that'd be a fun way to spend the recording season during the holidays.
Yes, I love it.
And hopefully an awesome way to get new listeners because those influencers will pull in their audience, which is another hot tip for whoever wants to start a podcast. You're only your reach will only go as far as your guests' audience, that they're willing to
their
share,
community. Yeah. And so, okay. So let's plug the podcast. I know we did a little bit of that, but go ahead, Rob, go ahead and tell again your podcast.
So I have the Leadership Launchpad Project podcast. Charlie's actually coming on tomorrow. So that one will be out soon. And we have basically human-centric, heart-centered leaders on the show. Executives, entrepreneurs, Olympians, they come on. We talk about leadership, we talk about business, and how to take your performance to the next level. And I guess hearkening back to your point of view, the one tip I'll give to people out there is, as a podcaster, you may not find your voice immediately. You may not have it already accessible to you. But the more episodes that you get into the show, the more practice, the more comfort you develop behind the microphone, that's when you'll start to become who you are on the mic. And that can be different than who you are in person, although, like Charli and I think we've sort of connected in this way where if you do the deeper work and you become the leader that you are, it all is just the same
It's
thing.
the same. Yeah.
And that's truly, I think, when you become and you find that audience that is your tribe, like as Seth Godin for the marketing folks would like to say, it's your tribe. And that's when you create the community that you want to be in.
I love it. I will mention again the dismantling the high performance narrative, because I think that's an excellent podcast. And it really, we have so many high performers out there that are just going, and hit this, oh gosh, I can't do everything moment. And then they can kind of come to this community and learn from others and grow. And I really enjoy that podcast and getting to know people, because I do think of myself as a high performer that
You absolutely are.
I need somebody to tell me, okay, that's enough. Calm down for a moment. James, what about you?
Oh, well, I can't wait to listen to your show, Rob. And I think we all have to, one of the things that we have to learn as leaders or entrepreneurs or podpreneurs here is that other folks have been through these things, and we always need to seek help with folks who really have frameworks, have figured things out. And I think that's what's great about the podcast, the personality. And as far as what we're doing is, we're focused on two main channels, episodic channels. One, the Industrial Strength Marketing Show, and my point of view centers around a couple of things. One, it's around the fact that when it comes to really living life, growing your business, and marketing, you got to make your way of doing things obsolete before generational technology, market forces, or the competition does. And that's so key. So much is changing in our businesses, in how we our roles in the workforce, and marketing, that you really have to look at that. And I really believe that Kaizen, or continuous improvement, is really key. And fundamentally, the problem that I see in marketing when it comes to manufacturing sector at different levels, right, is that a lot of it's missing, mismanaged, or misunderstood for a large part. And so that provides an opportunity for us in the Industrial Strength Marketing Show to bring on leaders at various stages of their journey. The president of Motion Industries, the co-founder of Marketo, and now the CMO of Demand Base, to talk about what's next with account-based marketing, account-based experience, and even just a big pool of folks that represent the diversity of the sector. So we have a very strong intent to have women in manufacturing featured, people from all backgrounds, all just different stories that we can really bring. And what we're looking for is to really talk about their careers, their insights, and ultimately marketing and selling that makes an impact. So that's the vision for the show. The second show we focus on is Industrial Marketer. IndustrialMarketer.com. We've launched that a couple decades ago. And that is really focused more on the practitioners level of getting the news, the reviews, the information, the technology and trends for and by industrial marketers. So we can look at the big picture, but we can also say, hey, what's the latest and greatest? Because there's so many folks doing it, but we're really doing it through connecting industrial buyers with suppliers. So that's our stuff, and we hope to have you. And I'm sure we will have Rob on pretty soon if you'll take us, and Charli back.
I love it.
And just
Bethany.
to plug your show to make other people listen, I think that right now, especially going through COVID, I think so many manufacturing companies saw a shift in where they were spending their money and moving their money away from marketing because they're trying to conserve their funds. And that's, we all believe, the wrong decision. But so listening to your show and really seeing the future of marketing and where they can go, I think is especially important to our listeners, that maybe marketing isn't their job or what they do, but they're the head of their company and they have the power to make these decisions. And it's just a really good tip that I think a resource people need to be tapping into right now.
It's so important. I think, like she said, we believe that the digital marketing, this is just an element of that. Podcasting. Thank you so much. We love it at Empowering Industry Podcast because it takes everything that we've done and puts it into one, program that everybody can listen to easily. Bethany, I did want you to just plug our Empowering Industry Podcast and what you think about it. And then we'll call it a day, y'all.
Here comes the good stuff. Listen, everybody.
Oh man, let's see if I can remember it after, what did you say, 100 episodes, close to 100? Every week we give you tips on social media. So something that you need to know in the industry, whether it's something you can do for your company or something you can do for your personal brand. Then we preview the news that comes from Empowering Pumps and Equipment. So really great news from some of our partners. And then we have an interview that Charli finds an awesome person in the industry to talk to you about their journey, something that they think is going to happen in the industry, just really good tips that I think you need to know. And, I think it's good. I think it's quality. I think we're fun. Or else I wouldn't be doing it.
Bethany is the best part of the podcast. And from time to time we have pets on there, children interrupting. It happens.
Yes.
But they always like to join us. And I think that's the best part, right?
Yeah.
You just get your whole family involved in a podcast if you want. Thank y'all so much for today. And I just really appreciate you taking the time to join me.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
And
Thanks
happy
for having me.
podcast day.
Happy podcast day.
Everyone get on the mic. Get on the mic.